Good. All right. We've talked in these classes about a lot of the different aspects of Passover. The miracle of Passover, God took us out of Egypt with eating matzah. We talked a little bit about the last day of Passover, right? There's a mimer you can look. I learned with somebody in Germany, but I put it up about the last day of Passover and the Mashiach meal. But one thing we didn't touch on at all, and that's the counting of the Omer. There's a commandment from immediately the first day after the first day of Passover, that every night thereafter we count the Omer. Right? Motzi, the holiday of Passover, we count the Omer. Counting the Omer. And this starts after the first day of Passover. After the first day of Passover is finished, that night, after we pray Mariv, so we start counting the Omer. What is counting the Omer? It's counting 49 days between Passover and the holiday of Shavuot when we receive the Torah. Counting, that's all it is. You count. Every night after the evening prayer, you make a blessing. Blessed are you, God, King of the universe, that made us holy with his commandments and commanded us to count the Omer. And then we say, today is 1 day of going out, today is 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, the 20 days, 30 days, right? Every day we're counting another day. That's the commandment, counting time. This, of course, is connected to Passover because it begins immediately after Passover, and it's what connects from Passover to receiving the Torah. A lot is written about this, especially in Chassidut, because the number 49 is not arbitrary. 49 is 7. The holiday, by the way, that it brings up to is Shavuot, which means weeks. There's 7 weeks. Shava Shavuot. The number 7 corresponds to the number of days of the creation, but it also corresponds to the 7 aspects of our personality, more exactly our emotional personality, not the intellect. That's what's called the 10 sefirot. There's 3 aspects of intellect and 7 aspects of what they call emotions. And each one of these 7 emotions is of God. That's why God created the world in 7 days, to express these 7 emotions. And we're made in the image of God. We also have these 7 character traits. And each one of these character traits, 7 emotions, what you want to call love, fear, balance, purpose, connection to the world in a positive way and a negative way, withholding ourselves. All these 7 aspects, each one are alive. And everything alive is complicated. So each one of these 7, each one also is contained in 7. And in fact, each one of those 7 that's contained also has 7. But we take it up to here. So what do? Each one of these 7 emotional traits has 7 facets to it. So that comes out to 7 times 7. Each one of the 7 has 7 facets. So we're, so to speak, taking these into account, making an inventory of our emotions and how we react to the world and how we act to the world, proact to the world, whatever. Mostly our interaction with the world and our relationship with God, emotional relation. Do we really love God? Do we not? To fix up our personality. That's what these days are for, to fix ourselves up. 7 emotions times 7. There's some people that have written also, interesting, there's Rabbi Simon Jacobson. He wrote a very interesting directory of what these 7 times 7 are, what each one, what we should do each and every day, where we should put our emphasis every single day. There's others also that did, very interesting. Okay, and that's what it says. That's what it means. You have to count from the day after. This is in Likuti Sichot Alef, that we have to count the day after Shabbat. There was a big argument between the tzaddukim, The Tzedukim were called they're called the Sadducees. The Tzedukim were basically very evil people, and they wanted to destroy the whole Torah. From them, eventually, the offspring came from the Tzedukim. There came also the Christians came out. They wanted to take the Torah and change it around so that everybody could just interpret it however they want to. So it says in the Torah that we have to start counting from after Shabbat, but which in fact it doesn't mean that. It means we have to count after Passover. Why does it say count after Shabbat? Why? So it's a big question why. But the Tzedukim really jumped on this, and they said, hey, the regular Jews, which of course they're in modern day literature are called the Pharisees or whatever they're, Pharisees, which they were really holy Jews. They all had the power to raise the dead, but non-Jewish sources twisted the whole thing around, and they're called the evil people. Even if you look in the dictionary, you see a pharisaical thing is like somebody who is like not trustworthy, whatever. So the Perushim, that's called the Perushim, the Pharisees, the Tanaim, the Amoraim, they said that the true meaning is that after Shabbos, it means Passover, and they brought proofs. But the Tzedukim said, if God wanted it to be after Passover, he would have written, why did he write after the word Shabbat? It must be that this is what God wants after Shabbat. And the Pharisees, what do you want to call it, the Pharisees, they're making the mistake. Okay, of course they weren't making a mistake. It does mean Passover, but so why did God write after Shabbat? Because they, in order, as Zol Zayin, their spirit of the Chem, in order that you can refine yourselves, Nemedi Memtes, taking the 49 days, namely the emotional aspects of what's called the animal soul, and to purify them, they Muzmen Nemen, you have to take from Shabbat. The aspect of Shabbat is above the whole creation of the world. Shabbat is, so to speak, God's day. Only the Jews are allowed to keep Shabbat. Non-Jews are not supposed to keep Shabbat. It's forbidden for them to keep Shabbat because non-Jews are testifying that there's a creator and that he's very interested in the creation. Therefore, there's one day of the week that's God's day. And that Shabbat, that's called the day of rest. We realize that really God is doing the whole thing. We have to take from that day, Shabbat, this fact that there's a creator and that he's really doing everything, that gives us the power to purify our 49 emotions. So that's what the first end of the first Sichot. Next, the din by Sfirat Omer, the law by Sfirat Omer is, as Oib Memfar felt that if you forget, if you lose, Chas v'shalom, God forbid, Ein Tag, one day in silent, Tzald Men, the Ibr Dikatag, you count the rest of the days without a blessing. Okay, how does it go? This commandment, it's a big question. Is it one big commandment or is it 49 commandments? Every day it's a commandment to count that day? Or is it that it's a commandment to count 49 days? One big commandment. And in order to count 49 days, so each day is important. Each day is part of that commandment. Now, why do we make a blessing on each and every day? Because each and every day is very special and we have to take it into account and fix it up and etc. And we need the blessing in order to fix it up. But the fact is it's one big commandment to count 49 days. And therefore, if one day is missing, so you didn't count 49. It's like putting on tefillin that one of the parchments is not there, or taking lulav and etrog, the 4 types, and one of the types is not there. You're not doing the commandment. So you can't make a blessing. So it says, therefore, if a person, let's say, God forbid, forgot to count the first night, he counts all the rest of the nights, but without a blessing. Because it's a big question if he's doing a commandment or not. Okay, the Talmud for them, the reason is, as is da, Adea, there's an opinion, as the 9 and 40 tag, that the 9 and the 49 days of Sfirat Omer, they are separate commandments. So therefore, even if we lose one day, so therefore, it has no effect whatsoever on the rest of the days, because every single day is a separate commandment. But there's also another opinion, as Yemei Sphira, that there is one big commandment, like I just said. Namely, we have to count 49 days. And there has to be 49 complete days. B'meila, so automatically. Oibman farfelt, if we lose one day, as felt showing in Tamimus, therefore it's lacking the completion of this commandment. Un men can showing the mitzvah for a merinit, you can't do the commandment anymore. You're missing one of the days. You can't make it up. The law is, wird men sich as that men seilt the Ibrika tag. So the law is we count the rest of the days. We count them. We do say today is the first one day, today is 2 days, today is 3 days, 4 days. I missed the 5th day. Doesn't make any difference. The 6th day, I said today is the 6th day, but we make it without a blessing. All the other is nifar. This is not understandable, says the Rebbe. And if we do accept as Alan 9 and 40 tag that all of the I'm sorry, I have to stop one moment. I have to stop, and we're going to continue on in a moment. So the Rebbe says it's not really understandable, nor they according to that opinion, felt if we miss one day, is doch dem nogea nit nor zu dem später Tag, if it's only relevant to the later days, nor euch zu the früher Dicker, it must be also relevant to the previous days. What does it mean? The commandment is to count 49 days. If you miss one day, that means that all the previous days that you counted were really not part of the commandment. As is doch ein mitzvah, it's only one commandment. Has gedarf sein de din as bis zu lester tag, that only until the last day net can machen a bracha, you can't make a blessing. How can you make blessings on the first days if you haven't done the commandment yet? And not only that, if you miss one day later on, then it means that all the previous days were what's called blessings. You took God's name in vain. It's one of the 10 commandments. You're not supposed to do it. You're making a blessing for nothing. It's one big commandment, right? Every single day you counted the day because it's just to show the importance of every day, but really it's just one big commandment. If so, how can you do that? How can you make a blessing every day? Don't you worry, maybe you'll miss a day. And not only that, the commandment is not filled until the last day. You should make a blessing on the last day. Mitzad dem chashash, because of the worry, Tamar, maybe, vet er, maybe he will forget, and maybe he will forget to tell him to count. As wegen the Friedrich Tag, then all the previous days will be a blessing for what's it called? In vain. You're taking God's name in vain. You're making a blessing on 49 days, and you don't count 49 days. You forgot one day. So if so, the law should be that you only make a blessing on the last day. But we don't. That's not the fact. The fact is we make a blessing every day. Why? Maybe we can say that be'emes zayne the taka 9 and 40 besonder mitzvahs. Really, the fact is that every day is a separate commandment. Jede Nacht, every single night, is a besonder mitzvah, is a separate commandment in itself. The mitzvahs is, but the commandment, the full commandment is, as the erste Nacht, the first night, mendelt silent, the erste sphira, we count the first, what's called sphira, the first number. The zweite Nacht, the second night, we count the second number 2. The third, we count the third, right? So therefore, if we miss one day, as therefore you can't count anymore. For instance, let's say we lost, we forgot to count the zweite Nacht, the second night. As can men nit sagen später, you can't say that is 3 days or 4 days. Why? Because the fact is we don't count every day individually. We don't say this is the second day, third day, fourth day. We say this is 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. It's all a conglomerate of the previous days. As ken doch nit sein kein dritter, there can't be a third or further, it's fater. You can't say 3 days, 4 days without a second day. So it comes out as verfallen ein mol silent. If you forget one day, is a chisaron. It's missing only in the later days, but not in the previous days, because you have counted, right? It really was the second day, and etc. So every day, therefore, comes out to be like a separate commandment, but the ultimate commandment that's finished is only when you count 49. What's this got to do with us? We'll see. As is Dachakira, so there's a how do you say, there was an investigation in an analysis. See the etzem inyan spirit sailing, if we're really, the counting is the main thing. When the Torah sagt, is the Metzias darin beinyan ha'omer the Omer or Shemitah or Yovel. Omer is 49 days. Shemitah is 7 years. Yovel is 50 years. Zol Zayin, a mitzvah is the mitzvah. Other as mitzad atzmo is the mitzvah is as nor kain metzias nit. Maybe the commandment is not the main thing. Varum mispar la'atzmo. I'm sorry. Yeah, varum, because mispar la'atzmo, counting itself is nothing whatsoever. Is only because of the commandment is mitzvosai achshiva. Therefore, the mitzvah gives it an importance. So the question is the counting the main thing, or is the commandment the main thing? The counting, we count the number of days, we count the number of years. The counting is the main thing. Or do we say, no, the counting is totally secondary. It's just like it's like a part of the commandment, right? And like, let's say, for instance, the lighting Hanukkah candles, is the number of days the main thing, or is the candles the main thing, right? Counting, what's the main thing? So I said, well, obviously the commandment is the main thing. So no, maybe the mitzvah is counting. If the candles, we can understand a little bit, because candles, you're doing something with an object. But counting, you're just counting days and counting times. You're not doing anything with something separate. There's no physical thing that you're doing with. So these commandments that deal with time, are we counting is the time the main thing, or is the commandment the main thing? Right? There's a commandment, Shemitah. It happens to be that it puts in the years into day. The nafkamina, the difference is like this. What is the main thing, the counting or the commandment? As an eved, let's say, for instance, if you have a non-Jew that you bought as a servant, a slave, there used to be a thing like that. It's not anymore. The law is that when you you take a non-Jewish person and make him into your servant, then he becomes like a Jew. You have to circumcise him, and he has all the commandments that women have. Now, women are exempt from all commandments that deal with time. So therefore, he's exempt from for instance, Sfirat Omer. He doesn't have to count the Omer because it's a time commandment. But what if as soon as you free that slave, he becomes a full Jew, and he's obligated in commandments that deal with time? What if you free a slave like this, a servant? By the way, it says that when you buy a slave, you have to treat him as well as yourself. You have to give him the best food and everything. You're not supposed to beat him. But a slave that gets freed in the middle of Sfirat Omer, there is given an Evan when he was a slave, a servant, right? He counted Sfirat Omer. See, can it's silent with the bracha. Can he make a blessing now? Well, he counted before, but he wasn't obligated. Oib men vet zagen. If we say as the main, just counting is the important thing, is vibalt erhat frier gitzalt. He counted, so therefore can speter tzelen with the bracha. Therefore, later on he can count with a blessing. Just one moment. Okay, now this non-Jewish slave, when he was bought, he was not obligated to count the Spirit Omer, but he counted. Anyways, he counted the days. Now you free him in the middle of the counting of the Omer, right? You free him on the 20th day. Now the question is, if the counting was the main thing, so he counted, therefore he can count with a blessing. But if we say that the main thing was the whole reason that you're counting is only because of this commandment, so he was exempt from commandments. He was exempt from the commandments. So because beforehand he didn't have to do the commandment, so he wasn't really doing any commandment by counting. So therefore he didn't. He can't count any further. The next year he'll count. Pumphi is bald and it could sail. The mele can air. Therefore now he can't make. He can count, but he can't make a blessing. Another example: a non-Jew that converts to Judaism in the middle of the days of the Sphira. There's no question. Why? Because it says that a non-Jew that converts, he becomes a new person. He's like a baby that's born. The question is by a non-Jewish slave that he's sort of like half a Jew. If he counts before he's released, then is that considered to be counting? Or no, he wasn't commanded, but at least he was a Jew. Is the counting the main thing or the commandment to do? The main thing. The question, the Shaila, clear to oich, their Minchas Chinuch. This question is asked also by a book called the Minchas Chinuch. And he says, Nit mitzad vos felt metzius svira, nor loitem svora as the ganzen 49 Tag seinen ein mitzvah. He takes the opinion that all these 49 days are one big commandment. So therefore, there's no question by him. A servant, a non-Jewish servant that gets freed, or also we have another case. Let's say a child before he's 13 years old, and he counts, right? He counts before he's 13, and in the middle of Sfirat Omer, he has his bar mitzvah, because that his question is are all of the days one big commandment or not? So if they're one big commandment, so obviously he doesn't make any blessings further because he can't do the whole commandment. Is the shayla shayach oich by a katan shenis gadol, right? Like we said, a child that he became older, he gets a bar mitzvah. Kach era is a katan because he was beforehand, he was not obligated in the commandments. He was less than 13 years old. Only because he does have a certain commandment, and that is his father has to educate him. About this 1 second here. No. But as this, it's only from the rabbis that he has to be educated. So therefore, it's only a mitzvah from the rabbis, but therefore it won't help to do the commandment from the Torah. Okay, so the counting is a command from the Torah. Now the question is, this slave that he counted on his own, right? Does that counting important? Is the counting the main thing? If so, he counted, right? He counted. But and afterwards after he gets freed, he can continue counting. What about a child that becomes bar mitzvah? It was a commandment for his father to educate him, but it's not a commandment from the Torah. Can he continue or not? So by the Minchas Chinuch, there's no question because it's one. He says it's one big commandment. Oberloit Vias is declared, like we said before, as the other tug that every single day is a separate commandment. As the reason for it is, we're going to see, by the way, what this has to do with Moshiach in just a moment. Because there can't be such a thing as the third day or the second day, right? Because every single day is important, every single individually. I'm sorry, because there can't be such a thing as the third day without the second day. So automatically, what do we say? Is doch das was man darf ankommen to the Friedekatag. That way we have to come to the previous days. This is not in order for the commandment which is in them, but only because of the number, right? The number is missing. Because the commandment is not 49 days. The commandment is to count. And counting we did every single day. Is therefore the question, nor the Gabi Eben Shachrer. The question is really only regarding to the slave that gets freed. Because previously he didn't have any commandment whatsoever to count, but he did actually count. So therefore there's no, I'm sorry. Right. Aber by a katan, a child that gets older, there's no question. Why? Because also a commandment from the rabbis is also a compared to, therefore it's a commandment. So by a child that he's before he's 13 years old and he counts, that should be good because he's doing a commandment, namely education. His father has to educate him. So he's doing a commandment. So he counted. Counting is good. He did. The question is by the slave that he gets freed. Before he counted, but it was no commandment, not even from the rabbis. He just did it on his own, but he counted. Is that considered to be counting or not? Good. Hayotzim is that, what do we care about this? What's this important? Is this achakelo? We have to wait for the Moshiach every day that he's going to come. Hayit by Nacht, today, this evening. Morgan in the free, tomorrow early morning. Every single moment we have to, in the middle of Sfirat Omer, after Sfirat, we have to, Moshiach is supposed to come every moment. Every moment. Counting, we have to count and wait, like counting the Sfirat Omer. The Tzemach said the third Rebbe of Chabad, once Gered Vegan, Biasa Mashiach, talked about coming to the Mashiach, and the Zoizman is such a time when, according to the Torah, according to the Gemara, he can't come. It says Mashiach is not going to come Erev Shabbos. He's not going to come on Shabbos. So somebody said, how can we wait for Mashiach to come Erev Shabbos or before the holiday? It says in the Torah clearly that he's not going to come. He said, how can it possibly be we should wait every day? There's certain days when it says he's not going to come. As that site, can are not coming. That on that day he's not going to come. The Tzemach Tzedek said, let the Mashiach come on that day. And what it says in the Gemara that he can't come, he'll answer that. He'll answer all of the questions that we have to ask. But that he'll answer all this question also. This says Tiku, there's something like Tishvi, it says that Elijah the prophet will answer all the questions. Mashiach will answer all the questions. So I'll answer that question also. The main thing he has to come right now. Is afilu ladas aposkim, even according to this, the spirit of that counting the Omer nowadays is only from the rabbis. Nevertheless, we can make with a blessing. What does that mean? That every day is important. Every day is important. A state in Dibra result says in the rabbis and also in the Ramban, as air is doch, and it takes a long time that this a mitzvah which we do now is really not all the commandments until Mashiach comes. It's not really a commandment. They're only commandments like from the rabbis. Why? This is just like a sign for the mitzvahs that we're going to do when Mashiach comes. V'yimar zakt, like we say, we say in our prayers in the Musaf prayer, only when the third temple is built, then we're going to do the commandments the way they're supposed to. As la'asid, only in the future, it will be, the commandments will be exactly the way you want. And we know what we're doing, but we don't do it the way God wants. Over the mitzvahs, the commandments, which we do now, they're not the ultimate completion. It's just like a preparation for the commandments of the Mashiach. So therefore, darf men nit mema'et sein, but nevertheless, from deswegen, nevertheless, we do not try to minimize in any way the preciousness of the commandments that we do right now. Because by means of this comes to the mitzvahs that we're going to do in the future, according to the Ramban. And it's known that the cause of this is higher, hagorim, that something that causes something is higher than the thing that it causes. Right? The causes, right? How does the Mashiach come? By means of our commandments. It must be that our commandments cause it. It must be something higher. It must be something precious, right? You do work for somebody, you get paid. What's the main thing? A doctor heals people and he gets paid for it. What's the main thing? Getting money, he gets good paid, right? Let's say you can heal somebody, he gets $100,000. What's the main thing? The money or healing? Healing is precious. Healing is without any that the cause of the reward is higher than the reward. If so, the commandments that we're going to do, that we're doing now, even though it's just a preparation, but they cause the reward. In some ways, they're higher than the reward. So these days that we're counting now until Mashiach comes, and the commandments that we're doing now, that we're counting until the day Mashiach comes, in some ways they're even higher than the actual arrival of the Mashiach itself. The Mashiach will reveal that. That's what it says. The Mashiach is going to come and he'll answer all the questions. He'll show how precious every moment is. Ubafrat, Zetman, we can see in the spirit, this commandment of counting the Omer, which the whole thing of counting the Omer is a preparation 49 days to the 50th day. The 50th day is the giving of the Torah. As davka dorach dem, by means of counting these 49 days, by correcting ourselves, our emotions, our deeds, and correcting time. Every single day is special. As by means of that, we can, as davka dorach dem, was mentzal itzer, sphira, that which we count now, like counting the 49 days, that brings to the 50th day of giving the Torah. The same thing now that we're counting every day until it comes the Mashiach. That men kennen silent will be able to count in the future with a blessing. Was from them, Zetman, we can see the Maila from Avoda, from Ister, the counting now in the time of exile. So that's what what did the Rebbe say over here? What did the Rebbe say? The fact of the matter is that counting Sfirat Omer every day is precious. We have to have all the days, but we make a blessing on every single day. We should make a blessing only on the end, but every day is important, and even more every day that brings to the goal, which is the holiday of Shavuot when we receive the Torah. So also now every day in exile that we're waiting for Mashiach and we're counting on that day, that's what brings to the future redemption. Like it says, like it says, it's better one moment of returning to God and doing good deeds in this world than all of the life of the world to come. And the world to come can also mean the coming of the Mashiach and etc. We have no idea how precious is doing a good thing in this world, because this world, we give pleasure to God. In the future, we'll get pleasure. Go to heaven, Mashiach will come. We'll get pleasure. But now, by counting the Omer, by counting every day until Mashiach comes, as this gives God pleasure, and this is what will bring the future redemption by means of the Rebbe Melech Mashiach Tzidkenu now mamish. Have a good day with Mashiach. Oh, we got to do the Yom Yom. Oh, today was a lot of disturbance. Listen, it's right before Passover. Baruch Hashem, we're given, there's a million things to do, and I have a million excuses. My teacher, one of my teachers that I learned a tremendous amount from, was Rabbi Mendel Futofas, and he said, a teretz is a sheretz. A teretz in Hebrew also means an excuse. And a sheretz is like a disgusting, a forbidden, like a spider, or a mouse, or a rat, or something. That's a sheretz. A disgusting, forbidden thing. It's also impure. So a teretz, excuses are disgusting. Maybe you got good excuses for not doing things. I couldn't learn today because of this. It says a teretz is a sheretz. You have good excuses. In the end, you didn't do the thing you were supposed to do. You have good excuses. You'll get rewarded. You go to heaven and everything. But the fact of the matter is, it still is an excuse. You didn't do what you were supposed to do. A teretz is a sheretz. Don't make up excuses. And even if you do have good excuses, try to, overlook them. Try to, ignore them. The yortzeit of the previous, this is the day that the third Rebbe of Chabad passed away, 13th day of Nisan. He passed away in 1866 in the city of Lubavitch, and he is buried there in Lubavitch, and his son is buried right next to him. You go to the city of Lubavitch, He's buried there with the Rebbe Marash. The fourth Rebbe Chabad is there. My grandfather related, at the age of 12, that Tzemach Tzedek began to write scholarly dissertations in Talmud and law, as well as Hasidic philosophy. Some of that book that we read yesterday, remember, Derek Mitzvah, some of it was even written before he was bar mitzvah. He was 12 years old. It was a genius. Even have a good day with Moshiach. Now, God willing, I hope 3 o'clock we'll have a class. If you tune in at 3 o'clock and you see that I'm not there, as it means that I'll make the class later because I want to finish the Haggadah. So we'll try to make the class at 3 o'clock. If not, you'll see it up on YouTube. Have a good day. God bless everybody, and see you, God willing, at 3.